Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Manager uses company's own processes to make sure the staff get the deal they want, and not the deal the company wants to give them. The second story. Assistant store manager told me not to leave work and stay up late. The third story. The husband wrote down the time the boss came to work in a notepad with the heading at the top of the page, Business Boss Hours. And the first story is, HR discovered that subjective rules can be applied subjectively, much to their annoyance. Here's a story from a while ago with malicious compliance on the part of my manager. It was just after 2000, and as I was working in IT, there had been a busy year leading up to the millennium. Now everyone was looking to get back to normal. The company had other plans for us and decided to make a third of the IT staff redundant. In my team of 12, this meant 4 of us. This wasn't really a problem, as even though I had just moved into IT a few years earlier, the job market was booming and getting a new job would be easy. This HR move was a bit of a surprise, as we were very busy. Lots of the routine projects had been put on hold, so lots of catching up. But whatever, they knew best. Redundancy with this company offered a month's salary per year of service, way over the legal minimum. They were offering for me a year's salary tax-free mostly, to find a better paying job elsewhere. An offer that would be hard to say no to, but unfortunately they were not going to ask. The way redundancy works for this company in the UK is that all the occupants of the role are ranked by very carefully selected criteria, and the lowest rankers are gone, are to make them very subjective and capable of withstanding any legal challenge that might lead to an industrial tribunal. If there was one thing HR hated above all, it was legal hassles. Criteria would be things like expected to be able to contribute well in other divisions of the company, and other such evidence-free bollocks. Why this weird approach from HR? It isn't as daft as it may appear. When trying to reduce headcount, the options in the UK are natural wastage, offering early retirement, offering voluntary redundancy, or having compulsory redundancies. In a team role in IT at this time, what tends to happen is that nobody is old enough to retire, and offering early retirement was actually expensive, as it was based on a generous company policy. Offering voluntary redundancy means the dead wood stays. Forcing a selection process stops the good people leaving, no redundancy money, and allows getting rid of the poor performers. Or at least that was the plan. Anyway, my manager had been told he was being made redundant, which was a bit of a tactical error. He wasn't really adhering to the company line as strictly as he might have been, had the circumstances been different. He gathered us together and asked who wanted to go. 4 of us, me included, volunteered, so all was good and everyone in the team was happy. My manager, maliciously complying with the ranking exercise, duly ranked us by the contrived criteria, but interpreted to our ends and not the company's. These rankings were passed to HR. Process were run, runes scried, oracles consulted, and ultimately decisions made. Lo and behold, the gang of 4 came bottom of the pack. Because of the extremely subjective nature of the criteria, nobody could prove the rankings were wrong. My manager then let the team know who was staying and who was going, as was right and proper, and we each got bye-bye loser, or you're still on board letters from HR. This wasn't the end of it though. HR somehow twigged they were being stitched up by my manager. Comparing the people leaving with the people with the highest annual appraisal scores was an exact fit. HR went into recovery mode and tried briefly to revoke the redundancies. This would have been totally legal except for one thing. It had been announced that we were bottom of the selection criteria. Continued employment would have been unthinkable, as we were declared the least competent to do the job, and they still wanted to get rid of 1/3. If they had insisted, this would have been potentially constructive dismissal, either for the gang of 4, in a weird backwards way. This is when the employer makes life untenable for the employee, such as saying you're rubbish at your job and they want rid of you. Or if another 4 were selected, then obviously the process was flawed, and they claim unfair dismissal, company not complying with own processes. Considering the entire rigmarole, particularly the selection criteria ruse, was designed to avoid legal hassles, they were painted into a corner and had to let the 4 of us go. So thanks, Dave, for playing the system so well to get the outcome the employees and not HR wanted. Epilogue. It was, as expected, easy to get a new job in those halcyon days. I had decided to take 3 months off, but a really attractive role came up. I started 5 weeks later, and have been there ever since. Epilogue 2. Eventually talking to my friends who stayed, this round of redundancies was, as I sort of expected, the precursor to eventual outsourcing. This was very much in vogue back then. About 2 to 3 years later, the overly slimmed down organization was transferred, called TOOP in the UK, Transfer of Undertaking, Protection of Employment, to an outsourcer. A bullet dodged there. TOOP means you transfer on your current pay and conditions, and you will rot with that salary, etc., until it's worse than your new employer's standard T&Cs. No pay rises, bonuses, increased holiday entitlement, nothing. This obviously also ends in another the Deadwood stays situation, as anyone who can get another job will, as soon as the market moves past them. I had to go through the same thing at a large charitable organization. A letter from Human Resources saying that sad face, my position no longer existed, but here's a list of identical positions, with some subtle wording changes that you could apply for instead. After years of employment, I was fired, with a big fat check, and moved on to another job that paid more, and had a much better organization and competent team. My current company has a great HR team, but that's only because it's small enough that there's no one in a strict HR position, so the real helpful people in the company fill those roles. Our HR woman is amazing. She will support you and help you with the FMLA and other documents, and do everything she can to make sure you have everything you need as a disabled worker to be properly protected. Our company also has a corporate version of the FMLA to protect workers who have been there less than a year. Rare, yes, but it exists. The next story is, the assistant store manager tells me I need to be more of a team player by staying late. This happened when I worked at a hardware store as a part-timer during my gap year. We had gotten a new assistant store manager, calling her Jen, not a real name, and nobody liked her. She had decided early on from her transfer that she was going to change how the staff worked in our store. Cast, Jen, not real name. Assistant store manager, Maria, not real name. Department manager, me, myself. Jen had been transferred to our store for about a week when she scheduled meetings with my department. I worked in the paint department. She sat me down and the meeting seemed to be going good. How wrong I was. Jen, hi OP, so I was looking at your time clock. You're very punctual and arrive to each shift 10 or 5 minutes early. But I also see that as soon as your shift ends you clock out. Why is that? Me kind of dumbfounded, because I'm a part-timer and I don't get paid for overtime like the full-time employees. That and it's when my shift ends. Jen nods her head. Yes, but I've heard that you don't check with your team members and will leave them high and dry. I'm now insulted as I've never done that, and I have a feeling it's the old hag in my department. That's a whole story on its own that told her this lie. Me, I've never left a customer like that. I always check with my team before I clock out. Jen, well, you need to be more of a team player. If you see your team is behind with customers, then you can't leave them until all customers are helped. Then you can clock out. Me, okay. Jen, good. So I did exactly that for the next 2 work weeks. It also just so happened that our store was having a 2-week-long 4th of July special sale going on for paint. Maria had scheduled me mid-shift from 12 to 6 for those 2 weeks. I did exactly as Jen said and didn't leave at my scheduled time. That entire 2 work weeks I would be staying 2 to 3 hours past my scheduled shift, until the rush ended, then clock out around 8 or 9 that evening. Maria had pulled me aside wanting to know why I was staying so late past my shift. Maria, OP, I know you know better than to stay past your scheduled shift. The latest you can stay past your shift is 15 minutes, then you have to clock out. Me, I know Maria. Jen is the one that told me I need to be more of a team player, and can't clock out until all customers have been helped. We've been slammed the past 2 weeks because of the huge sale we had. I can't leave my team high and dry. Maria, I'm gonna have to have a word with her and store manager. Maria set up a meeting with Jen and the store manager. Store manager found out from payroll that I had accumulated a little over 40 hours as a part-timer. Normally they wouldn't pay me, but state labor law says that if an employee works over 40 hours, they have to pay me. The max hours I was allowed to work was 25 hours. If I had gone over that, they wouldn't pay me. I couldn't do anything because of the labor law specifically say over 40. Hence why part-timers were never asked to work past their shifts. Jen got her butt chewed out by the store manager. She didn't get fired, but she was warned to never tell a part-timer to stay past their shift ever again. I'd always try to find her to tell her goodbye as I left the store, after my clocking out at my scheduled time. I had a job that tried to do that, and I contacted them at the labor committee. You don't have to put up with tyrannical nonsense that's illegal just because they threaten to fire you for it. It's also nonsense and one of the reasons people are so easily pushed around these days. You are so used to getting screwed by everybody every day that you just take it. Stop taking it. You're selling your labor. If they're not paying you for it, they're not getting it. It's really easy to understand. In fact, there should be a rule that if someone in middle management orders an employee to work beyond what they're allowed to prescribe, the employee's extra pay is taken from the middle manager's salary package. They would also have to pay you for missed lunch breaks and missed rest breaks. I'm actually in the process of suing the bar I used to work at for this. They asked me to stay late, and I would sometimes end up there after 10 to 11 hours without a break. The last story is, want us to work 40 hours no matter what? Sure can, but make sure you do too. So this isn't my story but my husband. Here's the cast. H, husband. JB, jerk boss. CW, cool coworker. JBO, jerk boss office mate. My husband is the king of malicious compliance. He will listen to a request and make sure to follow it, but sometimes not in the way intended. Husband worked at an IT job that was a project-based company. Sometimes he would work 80 hours a week to complete projects, and other weeks he would work closer to 30 hours if it was in between projects, along with his coworker. Jerk boss was promoted based on seniority and was on a power trip. He was the boss of 2 people only, husband and coworker. He was a crappy worker, never showed up to work on time, would frequently leave early as well. Jerk boss never worked a 40-hour work week even when projects weren't happening. Coworker and husband didn't really mind, since he didn't know what he was doing. Jerk boss pulls husband and coworker into another BS meeting. JB, it's come to my attention that you both are stealing from the company. Coworker and husband looking at each other confused. Neither knew what he was talking about. JB, time theft is a serious offense. I know both of you didn't put in the full 40 hours last week. CW, husband and I worked about 75 hours the week before due to big project deadline. We thought since there were no urgent projects, we could take it easy this week. JB, you're required to work 40 hours a week, no expectations. H, do you work 40 hours a week? I saw you leave at 3 p.m. yesterday. Jerk boss got angry at husband's question. Of course I do. I got in at 4 a.m. yesterday. That's why I left so early. Now if you don't comply, I'll write you up. Understood? Coworker was angry, but husband wasn't. He was scheming. For the next month, husband arrived early every day at 5 a.m. and said hi to jerk boss's office mate. Jerk boss was never there when husband arrived. Husband would then tell jerk boss office mate, would you let me know when he gets in? I got a question for him. Once jerk boss arrived, he would walk over to husband's desk. Husband would see him, usually around 10 a.m., and write down the time in a notebook. Big enough for jerk boss to see it with the title on the top page, Jerk Boss's Hours. After husband did this for a month, JB averaged about 25 hours a week, by the way. Jerk boss confronted him. JB, why are you recording my hours? You should not be concerned about that. H, just want to keep the company honest. I'm doing the same for CW, and wouldn't you know he has made sure to do 40 hours each week. JB, even if you turned that into HR, it wouldn't matter. It's your word against mine. H, not really. I call you at 5, 6, 7 a.m. at your work phone. Company issued cell phone that he leaves at work, every day. You never answer since you aren't there. Your phone record, my log, and several witnesses might make HR listen. JB was silent and then simply said, there's no reason to involve HR. We're fine the way we were before. We all do a little time theft. H smiles. Of course. Maybe we should go back to the way it was. JB, agreed. JB would eventually get fired, but for drinking on the job about a year later. It kinda sucks. He should have left when there was a deadline and made his incompetent manager handle it. Well, that's if he doesn't stop eventually. Once I had JB or his brother as my boss, I stopped working after hours to update and reboot things. It was an IT job. Started doing none of that before I got approved for overtime. JB had to start doing updates and reboots. He quit after a few weeks because he was working overtime, and his paycheck was locked up. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a nice day.